So welcome to this evening's Dharma talk. 2 weeks ago I gave a brief talk about the four noble and ennobling truths. And last week I gave a talk about the noble and ennobling eightfold path. And tonight we're honing in. I'm going to give a talk about 3 factors on that path. The factors related to meditation. Those factors related are energy, mindfulness and concentration, which are the meditation factors. And further to that, I'm going to talk about insight and serenity and how they balance each other, and also how they work together towards awakening. So, in Theravadan Buddhism, the word for meditation is bhavana. And bhavana literally means to bring into being or to cultivate. And what we cultivate with Buddhist meditation is serenity and insight. Insight, or vipassana, refers to seeing clearly and seeing distinctly, seeing things as they are. It is about seeing clearly into the Four Noble Truths, realising these Four Noble Truths and ennobling truths. It is also about seeing 3 characteristics of existence, which I mentioned last week: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca refers to impermanence. Dukkha refers to how conditioned phenomena cannot bring enduring satisfaction, enduring happiness. And anatta refers to not self. Sometimes it's also called emptiness, meaning that there's no single thing that can be found in all this. There is no enduring thingness about conditioned phenomena. So the other thing that I failed to mention last week, and I feel a bit remiss about this when I was talking about right view. Right view also refers to seeing clearly dependent arising. And there's a lot we can say about dependent arising, and I think I mentioned that dependent arising in the first talk. It is essentially about understanding conditionality, that one thing leads to another, that when there is this, there is that. With the arising of this, that arises. When there is not this, there is not that. With the ceasing of this, that also ceases. That's the phrase that's commonly said in the sutras about dependent arising. So insight is about seeing clearly and distinctly dependent arising, causes and conditions for experience, and knowing these experiences. And serenity refers to, often it refers to tranquility or passaddhi. Passaddhi in Pali refers to a relaxed body, a calm body, if you can say calm about bodies, and a serene and calm mind. It is the settling of things. It is the it has this. It produces calm. It also produces clarity. And these two aspects of meditation, serenity and insight, have different features which support one another. And there's a saying that goes that serenity and insight are like 2 ends of a stick. If you pick up one end of the stick, the other end naturally follows. And I like that stick analogy because I often refer to this meditation as being along a spectrum. And if we could put at one end of the spectrum insight, inquiry, and mindfulness, And we put at the other end of the spectrum serenity, absorption, and samadhi or concentration, then we'd have a kind of reflection about what we do with meditation. And different people are at different ends of that spectrum. People who call themselves insight meditators tend to be at the insight end of the spectrum, where there's an emphasis on mindfulness, and there's an emphasis on inquiry, and there's a kind of a deconstruction of experience. And those who call themselves serenity meditation practitioners are at the other end of the spectrum, where they're emphasizing samadhi, they're emphasizing absorption, and they are aiming towards serenity. Now, this spectrum of meditation, it all has concentration and mindfulness, but depending on where you are on the spectrum, the ratio is different. Like at the inside end of the spectrum, there's a tendency to have more mindfulness, and on the serenity end of the spectrum, there's a tendency to have more concentration. And in reality, what happens with us meditators, regardless of whether we call ourselves an insight meditation practitioner or a serenity meditation practitioner, in reality we go backwards and forwards along the spectrum. Sometimes we're emphasizing a little bit more serenity, sometimes we're emphasizing a little bit more insight. And and in any one meditation we can often slide up backwards and forwards along that spectrum as well. What we have with serenity is absorption. What we have with insight is inquiry. What we have with serenity is unity, a tendency towards unity, like a coming together and a gathering in together and becoming unified, both within ourselves and with our attention. And what we have with insight is deconstruction. What we have with serenity is a perception of stillness. A stillness and silence, actually. A stillness, a quietude, a serenity. Just this, we're aiming towards seeing stillness. Now, with insight, however, we perceive change. That's what we aim to see. With serenity, there is a singular object. There's one object that we pay attention to or attend to or become absorbed into. And with insight, there's multiple objects. It's moving from one thing to another. And Sayadaw Alpak, who teaches the jhanas, he says that serenity purifies the mind, whereas tranquility purifies view. Now, what I mean by purifying the mind is that when we bring our attention to one thing and keep coming back to that one thing, as we do with serenity meditation practices, where there's an emphasis on concentration, what tends to happen is that we no longer we feed into and strengthen our attention on that one chosen object, and we disregard other objects. With serenity, there's a priority about having one object. We put one object as a priority. So when other patterns come along, when other thought patterns or tendencies come along, we just don't feed into them. So in that respect, we're purifying our mind. We're cleaning up our mind. And with insight, what we attend to is mostly this dependent arising and also conditionality, as well as the three characteristics of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta. So what we're doing there is purifying our view, like developing right view, cultivating insight. So these factors work together. These two aspects of meditation work together. I heard Alan Wallace talk about serenity as giving muscle to insight. With serenity, we have a clarity and the power of mind to see deeply into experience, to see deeply into phenomena. And with insight, we develop an understanding. So serenity gives power to insight, and insight gives understanding and direction to serenity. Sometimes I think serenity and insight can be out of balance. And I've seen this on numerous retreats. Well, not numerous retreats, a few retreats, sorry, where people become quite disturbed when these aspects are out of balance. For example, insight alone, if there's a tendency to have insight with no serenity, then what we're seeing is impermanence, we're seeing not self, we're seeing dukkha, and it's quite freaky. It's quite anxiety-provoking because we don't have the psychological resources to cope with what we're seeing. And I've seen people go psychotic on retreats a few times, and I think it's because of this imbalance. And I know we all know about the dukkha jnanas with the stages of insight, and I think that some ways we can work with those dukkha jnanas is to balance our insights with some serenity. And serenity alone can be very peaceful, but it can go in untoward directions if we don't have any understanding. So I think they work best together. And a good way of understanding how they work together is to consider the 7 factors of awakening. 7 factors of awakening: mindfulness, investigation of dhammas or inquiry or interest, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration or samadhi, and equanimity. And often these stages of insight are presented in this sequence, and they all culminate, the 6 previous factors culminate in equanimity. And so the first 3 factors are very much related to insight: mindfulness, inquiry, and energy. The next 3 factors are very much related to serenity: joy, tranquility, and concentration. And these factors alone will produce equanimity. When I say these factors alone, insight will produce equanimity, and also serenity produces equanimity. And in together, they culminate in equanimity, as I mentioned earlier. So I think if we're a meditation practitioner, it's useful for us to review our meditations. And if there's a factor that's not so strong, it's useful to strengthen it. And what I notice in a lot of meditators is that the enlightenment factor, the awakening factor of joy is not very strong. And Analio points out how joy is so important for our practice. It's a positive reinforcement for our practice. Any positive psychologist will talk to you about how important it is to have positive reinforcement. So what I emphasize in my own practice is being able to recognize joy when it's there and nourish it. And that provides a really helpful balance to the practice. So I've probably gone over slightly, 15 minutes. I'll tell you in a second. Yes, I have gone over by 2 minutes. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that we can all balance our serenity and insight and our factors of awakening to wake up in this present moment, which is the only moment there is to wake up. So thank you very much.